We now move from what has been one of the most controversial or debated passages, Hebrews 6, verses 4 through 8, to what I think is perhaps one of the most interesting passages in Hebrews, namely the discussion of Melchizedek. This begins at the end of chapter 6 and then goes through the first 10 verses of chapter 7. Chapter 6, verses 19 and 20 say this: "This hope we have as an anchor of the soul, a hope both sure and steadfast, and one which enters within the veil, where Jesus has entered as a forerunner for us, having become a high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek." Now, many commentators include these two verses as the conclusion to the last section. However, they actually are a transition and introduce this next section concerning Melchizedek. Verse 19 speaks of the hope that had been referred to in chapter 6, verse 18, which said, "So that by two unchangeable things, in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have taken refuge would have strong encouragement to take hold of the hope set before us." Verse 20 then speaks of Jesus, who entered the true Holy of Holies as our forerunner and has become a high priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. That theme regarding Melchizedek, as I say, will be expanded on in chapter 7, verses 1 through 10. Now, but with respect to our hope as Christians is not just a desire or wanting something to be true or to happen. It's more than that. Christian hope is a desire with a confident expectation that it will be fulfilled. And we can have that confident expectation of fulfillment because our hope is based upon the unchangeableness of God's purpose, namely his promise to us and God's oath. Consequently, verse 19 describes our hope as an anchor of the soul. And, an anchor will remain firmly set on the bottom of the sea, regardless of how rough or stormy the sea itself is. And consequently, our hope in Christ should act to stabilize our entire life, regardless of the circumstances we are facing. And therefore, our hope is absolutely sure and steadfast. Now, the last part of verse 19 and verse 20 do more than this. They describe our hope as, quote, "one which enters within the veil, where Jesus has entered as a forerunner for us, having become a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek." Now, this not only introduces Melchizedek, but also ties our hope to Jesus Christ. And Hebrews 9, verse 24, also tells us that Christ did not enter a holy place made with hands, a mere copy of the true one, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. And so consequently, our great high priest, Jesus Christ, is able to save us forever, and he's ensuring that our hope will be fulfilled because he is in the presence of God in the true Holy of Holies, and it says that he is now able to appear in the presence of God for us. Now, because Jesus is our forerunner, we are guaranteed to follow him into the presence of God behind the veil in the true Holy of Holies. Now, so that leads to the discussion of Melchizedek, who was introduced in verse 20, but now that is expounded in chapter 7, verses 1 through 10, which says this: "For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham as he was returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham apportioned a 10th part of all the spoils, was first of all, by the translation of his name, King of Righteousness, and then also King of Salem, which is king of peace. Without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, he remains a priest perpetually. Now observe how great this man was, to whom Abraham the patriarch gave a tenth of the choicest spoils. And those indeed of the sons of Levi who receive the priest's office have commandment in the law to collect a tenth from the people, that is, from their brethren, although these are descended from Abraham. But the one whose genealogy is not traced from them collected a tenth from Abraham and blessed the one who had the promises. But without any dispute, the lesser is blessed by the greater. In this case, mortal men receive tithes, but in that case, one receives them, of whom it is witnessed that he lives on. And, so to speak, through Abraham, even Levi, who received tithes, paid tithes, for he was still in the loins of his father when Melchizedek met him. Now, several scholars consider Melchizedek to be a type of Christ. However, I think it's better to view Melchizedek as a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ rather than simply being a type of Christ. Melchizedek makes his one appearance in Genesis chapter 14 after Abram defeated the 4 kings in battle. And Hebrews 7 verses 1 through 3 describes Melchizedek in extremely elevated terms as the king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham as he was returning from the slaughter of kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham apportioned a tenth of all the spoils, was first of all by the translation of his name King of Righteousness, then also King of Salem, which is King of Peace, without father, without mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days nor end of life, but made like the Son of God, he remains a priest perpetually. Now, one reason that I think Melchizedek is not just a type of Christ, but was actually, in his appearance in Genesis 14, a pre-incarnate appearance of Christ, is that in Hebrews, Melchizedek is never called a type or a shadow of Christ, and Christ is not called the antitype. But in a number of places elsewhere in Hebrews, for example, Hebrews 8:5, 9:24, and 10:1, and 9:23, also Hebrews 9:9, and Hebrews 11:19. The author of Hebrews does use the word type or shadow or copy or pattern when describing various things. For example, in Hebrews 8:5, the tabernacle is translated as a pattern. He also used the word antitypes in Hebrews 9:24, where it's referring to the holy place in the temple. He called the gifts offered according to the law by the priests a copy and a shadow of heavenly things. And the law itself in Hebrews 10 verse 1 is called a shadow of the good things to come. In Hebrews 9 verse 23, the author refers to the copies of things in heaven as opposed to the heavenly things themselves. And in Hebrews 9:9, the tabernacle or temple is called a symbol for the present time. And also in Hebrews 11:19, it says that Abraham received Isaac back as a type of the resurrection. So my point is that because the writer used this language on several occasions, but he does not use the language of type or antitype or copy or shadow or pattern with respect to Melchizedek, I think that indicates that he did not view Melchizedek merely as a type, but as the true reality, which could only have been Jesus Christ himself in a pre-incarnate appearance when he appeared to Abraham in Genesis 14. Secondly, according to Genesis 14, verse 18, Melchizedek brought out bread and wine. Now that clearly points to Christ, who initiated the ceremony of bread and wine, in other words, the Lord's Supper, at the Last Supper. The other descriptions of Melchizedek that I just read in chapter 7, verses 1 through 3, likewise correspond to Christ. For example, Melchizedek is the king of Salem. Now, Salem means peace. In Hebrews 9:6, Jesus is called the Prince of Peace. And Jesus said, "My peace I give to the world." Salem is often considered to be Jerusalem, and Jesus was, of course, the king of the Jews, whose capital was Jerusalem. Further, Jesus was the prophesied Messiah, one role of which is to be king, the final king of the world, and to rule from Zion. Melchizedek is also described as the king of righteousness. Now, Jesus, of course, is the ultimate righteous one. And Hebrews 1 verse 9 specified of Jesus, "You have loved righteousness." And so all of these titles really are pointing, I think, to Jesus Christ. In Hebrews 7 verse 3, it describes Melchizedek as being without father, without mother. And so, of course, Jesus had an earthly mother, but he clearly, Jesus was pre-existent. He is eternal. And so, and Melchizedek also is described as having neither beginning of days nor end of life. The only person that can really apply to would be Jesus Christ, because Jesus Christ is eternal. And therefore, having neither beginning nor end of life means that Melchizedek is uncreated, immortal, and eternal. And that rules out any kind of a created being, even an angel. And therefore, I think that Melchizedek must be a pre-incarnate manifestation of Jesus Christ, who alone, as God the Son, is uncreated, immortal, and eternal. Now, Hebrews 7:3 says that he was made like the Son of God. Although that wording does not explicitly say that he was the Son of God, it does not preclude identifying Melchizedek with Christ, since in Daniel 3 verse 25, the fourth figure in the fiery furnace is described as, quote, like a son of the gods, end quote. Now, the fourth figure in the furnace clearly was intended by Daniel not to be merely like a son of the gods, but to actually be a son of the gods, in other words, an angel, as he is described in Daniel 3, verse 28, or a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ. In the same way, Philippians 2, verses 6 through 8, says that Jesus existed in the form of God, but emptied himself, taking the form of a bondservant, and being made in the likeness of men, being found in appearance as a man. Now, Jesus really was God, and he did not just appear to be a man, but he was, in fact, fully man. So again, the language here is consistent with Melchizedek being a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ. Now, in Hebrews 7:3, the description of Melchizedek concludes by saying that, quote, he remains a priest perpetually, end quote. Now, this fact clearly identifies Melchizedek as Jesus, since Psalm 110, verse 4 says about Jesus, "The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek." And so consequently, it seems to me that when Melchizedek is described here in Hebrews 7 as remaining a priest perpetually, that relates back to what was said of Jesus Christ in Psalm 110, verse 4. And so that we know that Melchizedek lives forever because of Psalm 110, verse 4, where God promises Christ an eternal priesthood. And that indicates, therefore, that Melchizedek is identified with or identical to Christ. And so Hebrews 7, verses 27 and 28, points out that the Levitical high priests first had to offer sacrifices for their own sins, However, because Jesus was and is without sin, he did not have to offer sacrifices for his own sins, but is perfect forever. Now, since Jesus Christ is a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek, Melchizedek himself, therefore, must have been without sin, and therefore, again, Christ and Melchizedek must be one and the same. And because recall that Melchizedek is described here as being, was the king of righteousness and the king of peace. And so by being the king of righteousness, that's indicating he was perfectly righteous and thus without sin. Finally, there are two other aspects which I think tie Melchizedek to Jesus. First, Melchizedek is the one who blessed Abraham, which showed his superiority to Abraham, because, as it says in Hebrews 7:7, the lesser is blessed by the greater. Now, other than the blessing given by Melchizedek, the only person in the Bible to bless Abraham was God himself, which I think, again, shows a correspondence of Melchizedek and God. Abraham, we know from Genesis 14, tithed to Melchizedek, and that showed not only Melchizedek's superiority, but also indicates Melchizedek's identity, since, according to Leviticus 27, verse 30, all the tithe of the land and the seed of the land, or of the fruit of the tree, is the Lord's. It is holy to the Lord. And finally, one of the Dead Sea Scrolls portrays Melchizedek as a heavenly being who will bring salvation in fulfillment of Isaiah 52, 7 through 10, and Isaiah 61, verses 1 through 3. And also will bring judgment in fulfillment of various Psalms, Psalm 7 and 82, at the conclusion of the final Jubilee. Now, salvation and judgment preeminently are the roles of Christ. And Jesus even quoted Isaiah 61, verses 1 and 2 as applying to himself. All of this, I believe, strongly indicates that Melchizedek was a pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus Christ. And all of this is consistent with what we saw in Hebrews 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, verse 18, which discussed and demonstrated the superiority of Christ over everything and everyone. Christ is the revelation of God. Christ is superior to the angels. Christ alone provides salvation. And that same type of description here is given of Melchizedek, which I think shows the correspondence between Melchizedek and Jesus Christ. So for those reasons, in my opinion at least, Melchizedek is more than merely a type of Christ, but is this fascinating character who appeared in Genesis 14 to Abraham and is also referred to in Psalm 110, verse 4.